Shut up! Shut up! For the last time, shut up! If everyone will keep talking, I'll put everyone in detention. Finally. Let me introduce myself.
That name's rather posh.
Makes him sound a bit upper class.
You're being kept in here for the next 5 minutes after the bell rings, and so is your mate. Anyway, in history class we'll be learning about a certain deranged tyrant from the start of the early modern period. If you know who he is, put your hand up. How can you not know who he is? He's one of the most distinctive figures of all time. Alright, I'll give you a couple of clues. He's fat, he suffered from gout, had a penchant for murdering some of his wives. Ah, see, now all of your hands have gone up. Now you know who I'm talking about. King Henry VIII ruled this country from the years 1509 to 1547. He was born in 1491 and died the same year as the end of his reign. This meant that he ascended to the throne when he was around 18 years old, which is incredible considering some U students will have just finished sixth form at that point. Now, King Henry VIII was a massive womanizer back in the day. He married 6 wives in total, having 3 children from the first 3. When he managed to sire a son, he stopped reproducing because he finally got a male child. Back then, royals generally preferred to have sons rather than daughters because the position of the monarch was inherited and passed down mainly through males in those days. And people thought that that was the correct and proper order of things. If you know a fair bit about history already, you recognize Mary first as Bloody Mary due to her zeal for persecuted Protestants since she was a fanatical Catholic. But we'll talk more about religious divisions soon and how Henry VIII was involved in those. For now, I'm going to show you all which wives were beheaded and divorced, as well as the ones that died and survived. Now I'm going to show you all the exact years where everyone other than Henry VIII was born and died, as well as the years his successors reigned. Alright, now I'm going to delve into the backstories of Henry VIII's 6 wives. Catherine of Aragon was Henry VIII's first wife. As the second part of her name indicates, she was originally a Spanish princess. Aragon was a territory that's now been incorporated into modern-day Spain, just like Catalonia and Galicia. It was common then for royals to marry foreign royals to form political alliance with other countries. This is why European royal families today are very interconnected. The late Queen's husband had links to Greece, for example. Catherine of Aragon was the daughter of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. Funnily enough, they wanted her to be the Queen of England ever since she was little. Why would they ever come up with that idea? Many Europeans were devout Roman Catholics, so people saw each other as being part of unified Western Christendom. This only changed once the Reformation started, but again, more on that later. Catherine had originally gone on a very long journey to England in order to marry Henry VIII's brother, who was called Prince Arthur. Eventually, Prince Arthur died, and Catherine was left stranded in England as a result. She couldn't just go back to Spain because she was already entangled with the Tudors, so she married Henry VIII. Catherine did get pregnant many times while she was Henry VIII's spouse, but sadly, only one child survived, who, as you already know, was Mary I. Anne Boleyn was born and bred in England, but being a noblewoman descended all the way from King Edward I. She had spent her youthful years across the English Channel in France, in the court of King Francis I. After that, she came back to England and became a member of Henry VIII's court. As for Anne's personality, she was clever and well educated, which is naturally expected for someone of her kind of lineage. Particularly because there were no state schools like this back then, so education was mainly a noble thing. However, she had two traits that aren't stereotypically associated with noble women, being outspoken and hot-headed. You could think of her as being like a Nora Batty from Last of the Summer Wine. She wasn't at all shy about expressing her views. She got openly angry that Henry VIII's divorce from Catherine was taking longer than expected, and Henry VIII even got yelled at by her for keeping gifts from Catherine in front of the court, no less. Of course, she was eventually executed for two specific reasons: treason and adultery. But keep in mind that these were likely trumped up charges. Her brother and 4 other men also got a death penalty together with her. They were executed as a group. As for Jane Seymour, she'd originally been a lady-in-waiting to Anne Boleyn. That means she was specially appointed to be the Queen's attendant and assist her, to wait on her, hence the title. But basic duties were, and still are, to provide companionship and counsel. Jane wasn't necessarily book-smart like Anne was, but she was exceptionally skilled at needlework, which was a thing that women of that time generally occupied themselves with. In other words, her strengths were vocational, not academic. Henry VIII, being the sleazeball he was, had started to fancy Jane while he was still married to Anne, which may have been why he had Anne executed in the first place, considering the rather suspicious circumstances where Henry married Jane just a week and half after Anne was gone in May 1536. At this point, Henry was very desperate for a male heir, only having had 2 daughters with each of his ex-wives so far. Lucky for him, he had finally had a son by Jane who, as you know, was called Edward. Unfortunately, Jane died shortly after childbirth as a result of suffering complications. As a matter of fact, when Henry VIII eventually died, he was buried with Jane, which shows just how much she was valued by him compared to all the other wives he had. That's the only sympathetic thing about him, really. Anne of Cleves, as you might be able to tell from her name, was also a foreigner. She was from the German nobility rather than the Spanish this time. And the reason why she was seen as a good candidate for being Henry's wife is that due to Martin Luther's influence, Germany had become increasingly Protestant, although the southern parts of it, like Bavaria, still clung to the Catholic faith. At this point, Henry VIII had already rebelled against the Pope by declaring himself the head of the English Church and severing ties with Rome. So it was thought that building an alliance with the noble Protestant family from that country would be a good idea. but he hadn't foreseen that unlike his other marriages which eventually failed, this marriage would be a failure right from the start. How did that happen? To start with, Henry VIII barged into Anne's dressing room in disguise to surprise her before the wedding happened. In England, when a princess is meant to fall in love with a stranger who then reveals himself to be a king. But Anne, being a foreigner, didn't understand what was going on. She felt uncomfortable when Henry VIII kissed her, didn't recognize him and simply turned away in rejection. This caused a fair bit of damage to Henry VIII's ego, to the point where he reportedly said afterwards, "I like her not." Henry VIII applied for an annulment shortly after the wedding, and it was granted. Before that, he falsely claimed Anne was ugly to get Cromwell, the leader of his church, to stop the wedding. However, Anne still got the title of King's beloved sister, and even got her own house as soon as she was still considered part of a royal family. So she became very rich, in spite of her marriage being a disaster. Now the way Henry VIII encountered Catherine is pretty interesting. She was a cousin of Anne Boleyn who became a member of Anne of Cleves' household while she and Henry VIII were still married. And guess how he reacted? He fancied her, of course! He didn't even try to hide his attraction. This had only made him even more desperate and impatient than before. When Henry VIII eventually got married to Catherine, she was only a teenager while he was 49 years old. She was younger than his eldest daughter, which is very concerning. Reportedly, Catherine was a happy and carefree woman and was rather keen on dressing extravagantly. Her clothes were adorned with many jewels. However, there was one major fault she had. She fancied people other than her spouse. So much so that she was having an illicit affair with a man called Thomas Culpeper. Henry VIII found this out in November 1541 and promptly got her arrested. And it ended incredibly badly for Catherine since she was executed for treason and adultery, just like her cousin Anne. The only difference is that charges were confirmed to be true this time. Finally, Catherine Parr was the last wife Henry VIII had. By this point, he entered his 50s and was well into his autumn years. His health had become so bad as a result of a adjusting accident that he was in constant pain and couldn't even walk. This was because he still had a wound from the accident which hadn't healed and hadn't been treated. Catherine was not only intelligent and well educated just like Anne Boleyn, but she was also a passionate advocate of the Reformation and quite skilled in writing works designed to promote it. Catherine was close to his younger daughter, Elizabeth I, who was inspired to translate Catherine's work into Latin so they had the widest possible audience in Western Europe, since Latin was still the language of the educated at that time. While Catherine was nearly arrested for her dissenting beliefs by being faithful to Henry VIII, in the end, she managed to outlive Henry VIII, marking the end of his whole saga.